All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Brandy Was Here, the podcast. I'm so excited to have my guest today. This is somebody that I have been following and learning from for quite some time. Y'all are going to want to follow and learn from him as well, but I'm going to let him introduce himself. So go ahead and tell people who you are and what it is that you do.
All right, my name is A Life Allah, and what I do. I like how that's phrased because sometimes people ask you, um, when they ask that question, it's kind of has intent behind it in terms of like, what job do you do so I can
Mm,
um, assess the value in terms of how I'm supposed to relate to you, right?
mm,
Um, but I like how that's phrased. What I do is I do community work. You know,
mm,
all of my work is centered around community and making community stronger, making community more self-sufficient, and it's generally centered around the communities that I'm a part of. So that would be, you know, black communities, black and brown communities, people of color, different marginalized groups, um, and specifically, what I can't even say specifically because I literally always have 1,001 things that I'm working on. Um, but what one role that I've moved into right now is that I am the site manager for a nonprofit in Portland, Oregon, called Our Village Gardens. And so what we do here is we have we're in the neighborhood of New Columbia, which is the most diverse neighborhood in all of Oregon, not just Portland, in all of Oregon.
mm.
And in this community, 17 plus languages are spoken. And so I'm the site manager for Our Village Garden. And we basically have three um, projects that we have. The main project is called the Seeds of Harmony um, Community Garden, which we have 80 plots of
Mm.
80 garden plots. And if you're a member of the community, you can get a plot for free. So all the plots are are filled by community members, primarily black and brown, also immigrant families and stuff. So it's a crazy mix of diversity and language going on, and even what's being planted in the garden. What also makes our program unique is that we have a market that's literally about 2 blocks away from the garden, through which
Mm.
it's like your average neighborhood market, but we also sell some produce that we grow in the garden in the market. And we also have it set up where we have if you we set it up where if, for instance, you're growing food in your garden and you want to grow like a surplus of something, we'll buy that from you and sell it in the
Mm.
market. So once again,
Mm.
it's a way to build the people, directly put money in their pocket, directly involved in the process. And the third uh, project of our village garden is we have an orchard that's behind the garden of 40 plus uh, fruit trees. So yeah, I've just started this position in January. I dived right in. I love it. This Saturday we just had a beautiful working party where no, we had a workshop where another organization, Growing Gardens, came in, worked with us, and it's just great to see different ways of doing things. Right. So, for instance, uh, the majority of people who attended this particular workshop were Spanish speaking. Well, guess what?
Mm.
The presenter was Spanish speaking. So guess what? The workshop was primarily in Spanish, and it's
Mm.
translated in English. But it's interesting because it's like, oh, we're not going to center English here because there's no reason to, right? So
Mm.
we can pivot, And usually our community meetings, literally while it's going on, I'll be speaking in English, somebody will be translating in Spanish, someone will be
Mm.
translating in Kiswahili. We have a huge African population here also, so it's just
Wow.
beautiful. So that's one thing that I do right now. But the other thing that I'm really well known for, which I'm still fully involved in, is Hood Health. And Hood
Mm.
Health, the Hood Health Handbook is the book that I was involved in producing, both volumes, volume one and volume two. And from that platform, uh, done a lot. I was able to do various speaking tours. I've spoken at Yale Hospital, Yale Medical School, Yale School of Nursing. I did a tour called the Colonization of People Everywhere tour, where I
Mm.
brought Hood Help concepts to Dallas, Texas, Houston, Texas, El Paso, um, all down that way. Uh, and yeah, with Hood Health, everything from workshops to talks to engagement. So those are the primary two things that probably I have my hand on right now. But I'm sure there's a million others too. You
Wow, that's a lot. And I'm glad you
know?
mentioned all that. I love when people are involved in their communities, and cultivate real experiences that help evolve people within communities. So I love that. We're going to talk a lot more in detail about all the work that you do and let people get to know you better. But first, I have some quick fire questions that I have been asking all my guests. The idea is that you just say the first thing that comes to mind. I'm not going to time you, but just kind of answer them quickly. Are you ready?
All right, let's go.
Okay. The first question is actually, uh-oh. Can you still see me? Because I can't see you anymore.
Yeah, I can see you. I can see you.
Okay. All
I
right.
see you.
Question number one. What is the best thing going on in your life right now?
The best thing going on in my life right now is that I get to determine my own schedule with this particular job. It is
Mm.
such a great thing that I've never had in my life, and it's still weird to me at times. Not, it's just like, yeah, I'll be in an hour, or I'm not coming in today. Um,
mm.
I'm loving it. It's still weird though, still weird.
Weird is cool. Okay. Question number two. What is your go to mantra or affirmation?
Let's go.
Number
Let's
three.
go.
What is your
Like no thinking, do it. Let's go.
mm. What is your definition of faith?
Faith, hmm, confidence,
Mm.
confidence. And so you can hold it in a religious aspect in terms of confidence in something that you have a relationship outside of you, but you can also have that confidence within yourself. So that works for me. Confidence.
Okay. What is the one thing you lean on when life gets hard?
Wow, that's a good one. That's a good one. I cry.
Mm.
That's pretty much what I do right now, because I've gone through certain portions of my life. Um, not expressing that part of myself, and especially since my sisters passed, I just let myself
Mm.
have those moments, when I need them, and so that works for me right now.
Mm. What do you think is one big misconception about spirituality?
Um, I Spirituality is not is not general. I feel that a lot of people approach it as general when there's very specific types of paths and traditions and
Mm.
um, there's steps. You know what I'm saying? There's steps. And so like I feel like in a capitalistic kind of society that people want the quick, right? They want the quick, the instant,
Yeah.
like spirituality in a bottle. Okay, drink it. I'm a holy man now, kind of stuff. And it
Right.
don't work like that. And in none of our traditions, no matter what tradition, that's out there, none of those traditions advocate that. They do
Mm.
all advocate that. You have to spend time, you have to spend a process. So I think for me, the biggest misconception is that people think that spirituality is like a mixed spirituality, and it's not.
Mm. That's good. We're gonna come back to that. Name a book that has helped you on your journey.
Woo! The book that has helped me on my journey. Oh, how can I not forget this one? I always said that this is the closest thing that I have to my own personal Bible,
Mm.
which is Dune,
Oh
the
my
sci-fi
god.
novel Dune,
Okay, so I have that book
for
on my
several
shelf.
different reasons. You need to read it for several different reasons. For those, the movie is out now. You can kind of get in touch with the movie, but there's several different ways you can read it. Like you can read it as an environmental novel. You can read it as a drug trade novel. You can read it as a religious way. So there's different ways that you can read it. So that's pretty much my Bible go to.
Okay. What single thing do you want to make absolutely certain you do during this lifetime?
Ooh, that's a good one because I feel like I have several books that I still want to write, and in this
Mm.
lifetime they have to get out because I've gotten to the point where I know that these books can only be written by me.
Mm.
I can't leave notes for anybody else. I've tried to. There's certain books that haven't been written yet because at various times I was trying to have people um, help me write these books and stuff, and I realized that research or just how I write or how it's presented or even the concepts, it can only come from me. So I think for me, there's certain books that I want to make sure are done and out there.
Mm. That was good. Okay. Do you think everybody should write a book about their life? Or
Yep,
write a book, period?
I honestly think they should write a book. Specifically, I feel that they should write a book about their life, about the lives of their parents, about the
Mm.
lives of the people around them, because there's so many people around us who are worthy to be uplifted and to be praised. And I say we in a general sense, we spend time focused on celebrities and all these other people
Mm.
over here, where there's literally people in your life that are incredible. For instance, a couple of books that I have to write is one, my father's life story. Um, Before he passed, he was born in 1922, passed when he was 92. Um, I did like about 8 or 9 videotape recordings of him, and he's always wanted
Mm.
his story to be told. Um,
Mm.
and his story is incredible. My mother, same thing. She left me with black and white photos from the 40s, take it back, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s of our whole family life. It is my responsibility, as a black man and being of that lineage, to get that out there because we don't, we already see what happens. They change history,
Mm.
and so if we don't even tell the whole history of our own family,
Mm.
of course we're going to have problems down the line, with all the other stuff. So like ancient history and everything is great. I'm a fan of it. I'm an advocate of it. But I want to know about your grandma. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I want to know about your aunt. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what I want to know about because that's the thing that I can most closely identify with. You know,
Yeah.
everybody should
Yeah.
write a book.
I
Keep a
love
journal
that.
also.
I feel the same way. And I ask that because obviously you're an author. And I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast, they're really trying to figure out their place in the world. They're searching for their purpose. They're trying to figure out how they fit into all these things. And like you said, we have a good working knowledge of the big histories, right? These wars that happen, these historical events. But where is your place in all of that? And I think that comes through us telling and sharing our stories. And we don't do enough of that, right? I know a lot of people are big on
Right.
like celebrating holidays and family gatherings, but you just get together and kick it. Like tell the stories. I really like and not that I watch a lot of Tyler Perry, but there's one Medea movie. I think it's called The Family Reunion, where they have, it's like they're at that big house and Cicely Tyson is in it. I love that. And I wish families did more of that, like the coming together of and telling the stories because you're just out here in the world thinking that you're the first person who might be going through something or did something. And it's people right in your family that could be your direct inspiration.
Yep.
And I say that like a lot on the entrepreneur front. Like people are like, oh, I don't know anybody that was an entrepreneur, but you have somebody in your family 2, 3 generations back who was trying to do it, and now that
Yep.
inspiration, that fire is inside of you. So I love that. I'm a big advocate for that. We have to do more of that for sure. Now, we were talking before I hit record, and you were telling me that you were born in Chicago, but tell people a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing. What was that like?
Oh, it's interesting to be at a point where you actually are um, consciously looking back at your life.
Mm.
Like I can honestly kind of think at the point where it's just like, oh, now I'm looking back, right? At a certain point, I'm just like running through life, right? Like doing whatever. But now, reflecting back on those lessons and everything. My family. My father was born in Kentucky in 1922. My mother was born in Little Rock, Arkansas in
Mm.
1935. Um, my mother's side of the family, my grandmother and all her siblings, her 14 siblings,
Mm.
um, they they migrated to Phoenix, Arizona, in the second great migration. And I say migrated, and I still had to catch my tongue because, once again, like you said, those stories, right? Um,
Mm.
I was talking to my aunt, and this is after my mother passed and everything, and she's like, "Oh no, we didn't migrate." I was like, "What?" She's like, "No, we were chased off our land in the middle of the night, and we
Mm.
had to flee Little Rock, Arkansas." So, like, this
Wow.
is a major story of my family that I didn't know until literally after my mother passed.
Mm.
So like you said, once again, it's important because if that story isn't told, it's not there no more, right? It
Right.
doesn't exist, and then that past doesn't exist. So my family was, like I said, was one of the first black families. They were the first group of black people who moved into Phoenix, actually Tucson, Arizona.
Mm.
My father um, went up through when he was 13, 14, went to get to go live with his sisters who were in Ohio. So he left home at
Mm.
like 13, 14, and just literally walked and took a few months to get to freaking Ohio. Like,
Wow.
yeah, next level stuff. So the church that I grew up in, it's called the Supreme Council of the House of Jacob. All my family on both sides of the family, all belong to the same church.
Mm.
All right. So um, my father, what I'm saying, he joined the church. My mother's family joined the church. This is how they met, you know, and linked up and everything. Um, so like what happened was is that um, my father was what's called an overseer of the church. So he was also a pastor. So he was oversee several pastors. But what the structure of the church was that pretty much every year you might be reassigned somewhere, right? So he was in Chicago where I was born. Um, but then what happened was is that when when I was two, we got reassigned. So we moved to Phoenix, where my sister was born. And then, like 2 years later, he was reassigned, and we moved to Compton, California, where my brother was born. And then we moved to Connecticut, where I grew up ever since I was 4 years old. Um, so
So let me ask you.
what
So
what I
you
did,
you lived in you experienced your childhood in a bunch of different places, and that's kind of similar to my life. We moved around a lot. What what do you remember about living in those different places? Because Tucson is very different from Compton, from Ohio, from Chicago. So what was that experience like
uh-huh,
with you,
uh-huh.
like entering school, like just growing up with your siblings? What was
Well,
that like?
well, see, we moved to Connecticut by the time I was four. So I basically grew up in Connecticut, but in those, I still do remember those other two places. Ironically, like I remember Compton specifically because of the architecture. The whole mission type of architecture in terms of like Spanish influence and stuff. Like I remember that distinctly in my brain. I remember distinctly uh, uh, Dora, who was a Spanish-speaking Mexican girl who was my best friend in Compton, California. And I remember the plum tree because the plums were so sweet. You know, um, I don't really remember Phoenix that well, but I can draw out the map of our house in Phoenix. Like I know the whole floor plan and everything. Like it's amazing certain memories that embed themselves in you. Um, but yeah, pretty much by the time I was four, um, we settled in Connecticut, and it was it was the 70s, so like we came in there right. I always tell people that we came in there the era that I call when I was little, I call it Martin's children, right? Because we were the generation that was literally born like right after civil rights, you know, um, and this little nice little bubble period before the rise of crack, right? So this nice little bubble period in the 70s, you can see it in the cartoons and everything. It's like they almost got it, right? It's like Sesame Street was so diverse and everything. Uh, Everything was like, all nice and fluffy and everything, Mr. Rod, everything. It looks like, oh, we're going to make it. And then they put the crack in the neighborhood. Then they put, certain things happened and sisters, fell down. But that little period in there, that junk was like heaven to me. And the school I went to was called the elementary school I went to was called Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary school anyway too. So we did all the whole knowing the black anthem and all that kind of stuff growing up. It was beautiful actually.
Was your school in Connecticut, was it pretty diverse, or was it mostly like black families?
No, the neighborhood I grew up in New Haven. I mean, in New Haven, all black neighborhood. Um,
Mm,
so it was interesting because I tell people like I grew up in when I say I grew up in a black neighborhood, like I walked to schools. Everybody went to the same school, black schools. The grocery stores in the neighborhood, the churches, the barber shops. So I grew up in that neighborhood probably till like my early teens, and then we moved to another neighborhood that was kind of diverse. But yeah, no. As far as I was concerned, Connecticut, New Haven was black, all black when I was
mm,
little. You know, which kind of
yeah.
paralleled my mother's situation growing up because she went to a school in Phoenix, Arizona, which is George Washington Carver School, which at the time, it wasn't until a few years after she graduated high school that it became integrated. So her whole career through school was in all black schools, you
Mm,
know, like all the way through high school until she went to college.
mm. That's interesting. I don't think. I think. Well, here in Chicago, there are still some black neighborhoods, but like in California, that's not a thing at this moment. And growing up, that really wasn't a thing. Neighborhoods uh, were really diverse. It was black and brown, but you couldn't. There were no neighborhoods, at least where I grew up, where you could say this was a black neighborhood. So that's different. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So what I want to
definitely,
ask you is,
definitely. And
so
even
having. Oh, go ahead.
no, 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 bring it. Let's go.
No, I was gonna say, having a father as a pastor, how did that influence your
Mhm.
upbringing? Did you grow up strict?
you
How,
know,
like, what was that like?
yeah. So our church what is what's called a holiness church. So in terms of denomination, so a lot of people aren't familiar with the holiness denomination. They're more familiar with the Pentecostal, which holiness is basically an offshoot of that. So our church is the very very was very very strict. It was all like we didn't celebrate holidays, the whole speaking in tongues, um, not interacting with the world, kind of like that. But my parents knew that they wanted some stuff for us, right? So even within the construct of that, they still pushed us to do various things. So for instance, we were all involved like in the arts and sports at school, you know, because our parents both came from rural backgrounds and they wanted us to have that. My father also, he didn't graduate. His highest grade that that he graduated from was sixth grade. Um, but you could not tell this because that man was so articulate and he knew the Bible backwards and forwards. And he not just knew the Bible, he knew um, the history, languages. And so for me growing up, I eventually, of course, broke away from the church. And it was kind of strict for me growing up. But I don't have, a lot of people have a strong bitterness when they leave such organizations. I personally don't, because I learned a lot from my father. Like for instance, our church didn't pay the ministers. So you know how some churches the pastor gets mad money. Yeah, that didn't happen in our church. So all the men in my church had to work. So I grew up seeing all these men having jobs, working. My father's very very, even though he didn't only graduated like sixth grade, very studious. So I learned a lot from him in terms of once I broke away from the church, how to research, how to study, how to dig into things. Um, and I learned a lot of good values, from both my mother and my father, um, that I attribute to them coming through the lens of the church. So it was rugged for me growing up, but I kept involved in a lot of things like the arts and stuff. So it really wasn't a big thing for me. But yes, once I did go into college, I wilded out for a couple of years. I wilded out for a few years, but then I was like, oh, this is stupid. This is dumb. I don't want to do this. And it's ironic that I'm actually probably like in terms of discipline and whatever, I'm probably more church like than a lot of the people in the church.
Mm.
In terms of just like, yeah, I'm good. I want to try that kind of stuff. And I think that's why my father respected me in the end, even once I left the church.
Mm. So what was the major factor that caused you to leave the church? I know people leave for a lot of different reasons, but what was your reasoning? And once you left, what was your life like after that? Like, what did you go to?
Well, the I was about my mid 15, 16. In my mind, I was already starting to deconstruct church
Mm.
um, because things just didn't make sense to me um, biblically. So like
Mm.
some of the most obvious ones and some of the ones that dig deeper, like I couldn't get with like okay, Adam and Eve. Okay, where's everybody else coming from?
Mm.
Or like Noah's Ark, just like all these different logical fallacies in terms of, for what I was seeing.
Mm.
Um, but I still didn't have a compass in terms of where to go or what to do.
Mm.
So I pretty much stayed in church because it also was my whole family, both sides belonged to this church, so like, um, where else was I going to go? I'll
Mm.
be literally leaving my family. Um, but what happened was between my junior and senior year in high school, uh, public school, by the way, I always tell people public schools can really be the bomb if they have the right structure and everything. There was a
Mm.
program that was started. IBM and another major construction company in New Haven, they donated a lot of money to the public high schools. They had a
Mm.
program that they ran for about 7 years, and I came in the second year, I think, where they sent a group of high school students to Africa for the summer. Um,
Mm.
so between my junior and senior year in high school, I spent the summer in England, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Mozambique, and Tanzania.
Wow.
Okay. Um, yeah, life changing. My 17th birthday was in Kenya. Like
Mm.
um, it was life changing. And I came back. I got off the plane. I remember in Kenya, and I was like, there are only black people here. Like from the top to the bottom, from the
Mm.
janitor to the CEO. Like all I was looking around was seeing like black people, and it was ironic is that we had one uh, white student that came with us, and I was like, Dad, I wonder how they feel right now. What I was saying? Like this is the first time that they've probably been in this situation, right?
Mm.
So um, it changed a whole lot about me. It changed my eating regimen at the time.
Mm.
When I came back, I was on I was on that. I was on it. It was
Mm.
also the golden era of hip hop. So everything
Mm.
was like reaffirming my trip, right? And this is also when I became a 5% in my senior year in high school.
Mm.
There was a group of brothers at a table. Because when I came back, I stopped eating pork because we went to a slaughterhouse while I was in Africa. And I was like, oh, I'm good. I'm good. Um, and so they heard through the grapevine that, I didn't eat pork. So they rolled up on me. It was like, yo, you righteous? I was like, I don't know what you mean. Uh,
Mm.
I don't eat pork though, And so they slowly introduced me to the 5%. I became a 5%er in my senior year, one of the few 5%ers that were in New Haven at the time. And that changed the trajectory because then it re it gave me somewhere to go, right? So
Mm.
I already like decided that I was leaving church, but now it gave me a lens by which to now process information. Um,
Mm.
and so it also gave me, like I said, a social circle now to go to because, like, remember, as I said, I was like my whole family. So like me
Mhm.
not going to church or me not going to like convocations and stuff was me not going to was like me not going to family reunions. Was
Mm.
like me like casting myself out for lack of a
Mm.
better term. And so I went through a period where I just I was real hardcore 5%er. Like I was all like flipping stuff like, "Oh, that's lies." Da, 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 da. I was very not nice, put it that way. I
Mm,
reached a balance though where I was able to once again interact with my family and and just live life. You know, took a while though.
yeah.
It took a few years though.
Good. I have a few questions about that. I wrote it down so I can keep myself on track because I want to make sure we hit these points. Now, for people who are listening to this, they may not know what a 5 percenter is. Can you break that down in simple terms to someone who has never heard of it before?
Yo, it's so funny because I think that every time like someone asks me to break it down simply, I'm just like, man, is there a simple way? There's so many different ways to approach it. The simplest way is that the 5 percenters are the 5%. You know, you might have heard of us as the gods and the earths, the nation of gods and earths, various different titles throughout the time came about because a man, who we call Allah, who at a certain time belonged to the nation of Islam, decided um, that the information in the nation of Islam needed to get more to the youth, and he
Mm,
basically left the nation of Islam and developed certain what we call supreme mathematics. He developed simple techniques and ways by which we were to um, look at information, and that's the simplest way. So the simplest terms of it are the body of it, you know, which many people hear in different ways. Like we say, the black man is God. Now,
mm,
when we say that stuff, we don't mean that we the God of the Bible kind of thing. Like, right? Like, I'm
mm.
not a magician. Like people say, like, your God walk through a wall. Like, ask your God to walk through a wall and then get back to me. I mean, in simplest terms, we're like, God to us just simply means black man or original man. So you're black, right? But what does it mean to be a man? What's your
Mm,
responsibilities to be a man? So it's basically like taking accountability for your manhood. That's what being a 5% is. Or for in terms of a woman, taking responsibility for your womanhood. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like it's basically like a wall against excuses. It's like we
mm,
have a little trick phrase that I say many times. It's like, yo, when I do great, yo, all praise is due to me. Yo, when I mess up, all praises due to me. You know what I'm saying? It
mm,
brings it back to in terms of just like to solve this problem, you have to be at the center of it. Um,
mm,
and so where people may have familiarity with the 5% is that many people are first introduced to it through hip hop. So there's a lot of
mm,
people in hip hop who either have been influenced by the 5% or 5% is themselves. So like Rakim is a 5%er.
mm,
Many members of the Wu-Tang Clan, 5%ers. Many people in history have been hip hop have been influenced by 5%ers. So Queen Latifah, you know,
mm.
uh, and in different songs you can pull certain things out. So that's the short, not so short, you know, clearest explanation of it. Um,
That was
and if they
good.
want to get
That
real
was the
like
clearest I've heard it
religious,
explained.
religious vibe, you know, like it's a relationship also. I don't want to use the religious analogy, but it's an easy way to use a religious analogy, which is the religion of Islam. They have a branch called Sufis. Uh, with Christianity, there's Christian mysticism. With Judaism, there's the Kabbalah. So all those traditions in those religious traditions, basically, they shorten the distance between themselves and what they consider the divine. So
Mm,
that's the same thing. So Sufis will refer to God as their lover. You know what I'm saying? The same thing with the Kabbalah will have these different ways to get closer to God, right? Basically, to get closer to the divine and cut out the middleman. And
mm,
in purest terms, that's basically what being a 5%er is about. It's about getting as close as you can to what you perceive or see as, you know, the greatest good or righteousness, and cutting out middlemen. You know, so yeah, that's
mm,
basically it.
that was good. That was good. Now, you were embarking upon this transition as a senior in high school. And it's a big step for somebody who's 17, about to be 18 years old, to make such life changing decisions. Had you not, and this is just speculation, had you not gone on that trip to Africa, do you feel like you still would have had the confidence and courage to make that decision to step away from your religion and essentially your family to make this major transformation?
I think I would have had. I think I would have, but I don't think that anything would have grounded me as much as being a 5%er has, and I
Mm.
probably would have went back.
Mm.
Because I was also I'm always been like a studious, person reading and discovering. So even before I became a 5%er, I was exploring a whole bunch of different things. Right, I was looking into Santeria. I was looking into Egyptian, the All Star Set Society. I was looking into different things, um, and what I took back from them at that time was that they were just the same thing I was leaving in a different outfit, right?
Mm.
So I feel that I would have probably went to them at the time, and then I probably would have just went back. Um, I, like in terms of growing and evolving, I see a lot more differences now. But
Mm.
at that time, that's how I saw them, and I probably would have went back.
Mm. Yeah, I think that
And my
happens a
father, my
lot.
father is well known about that. Yeah,
That happens a lot.
definitely.
We leave,
Yeah,
but
my
we come
father
back
was
because it's familiar.
right, right. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because in addition to my 5% and you know lifestyle, culture, how I've been living, my family lineage also has within it hoodoo. All
Mm.
right, so I know a lot. I just know a lot about that because I'm a crazy historian kind of person, and so then once I realized that, I started even looking at the Christianity of my family different, right?
Mm.
Um, it wasn't Christianity as it's pretty much just promoted nowadays. Like there's other layers of it. There's Africanisms within, Black Christianity. So it's not the same. So
Mm.
yeah, I appreciate it for that a lot more than I did when I was 17, 18. Um, so yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, my third question about this is when you came back from your trip, when
And then
you
my father
found.
was a minister. I mean, my father was the big wig in the church. So
Okay.
I feel like I would have definitely come back and just followed in his footsteps, because that's what
Mm.
everybody expected anyway. You
Yeah.
still there?
Okay. Now, my third question to this is when you came back and when you share with your family, like, I won't be going to church anymore. I'm now a 5%er. This.
Hold up, I couldn't. Something blitzed, so I couldn't hear that question. Oh, no. Okay, we still recording. This is my workspace. It's kind of messy right now. All right. Can you hear me? No, 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 it's all good. Listen,
Yeah, yeah.
I've done a podcast where I already know it's always technical stuff.
It's always
We,
something.
you know what I'm saying? We ain't at the point yet where we have like a whole like crew behind us handling all the
Right.
little stuff. When you gotta like do the interview and troubleshoot at the same time,
Right.
it's a challenge.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, but my
All right.
my
So what was
question
your last?
was about how your family received you and responded to you making this change in your life. Because a lot of times, people listen to this podcast and they'll message me all the time. They'll get like a lot of really good information. They'll get inspired by guests. I'm like, I need to do that in my life. And then they don't do it because when they're making their proclamation of this is who I am now, this is my boundary, this is the change I want to make, this is my new life, and they get pushback from people who are used to the old them, they kind of fold, right?
Mhm.
We started this conversation off talking about community. Community is very important. So what was the response of your community when you introduce this new idea of, or introduce yourself as this new person?
Yeah, 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 yeah. It didn't go well. But it didn't go well mainly because I was an a-hole. Like
Hmm.
and I think this is what happens when a lot of people get new information, right? Um, and we can see it a lot. Even we can especially see it a lot. I feel during the onset of the pandemic, right? All of a sudden, everybody became experts, right? Everybody was an expert on everything, and they went extra hard, right? You just got the information. You ain't even vetted yourself. That's how I was when I first became a 5%er. So I was like, this is bull. I went to my mother's refrigerator. Now, see, I'm still there. I threw out all the pork. My mother looked at me and said, "You may call yourself God, but you ain't God here." You know, um, and so I think as much as we put the onus on the communities that we're leaving, I think it's also on us to to transmit the information um, in the right way. And many times, many of us, we're just excited. We learn something new. You know what I'm saying? We learn something that we feel clears up every question that we've had, and we want to share it, right? We want everybody to have the same reaction to it that we have. But the reality is that you didn't make that change until that moment, right? There was someone else who had that information who made that change a long time ago, who you probably didn't listen to, right? You had to get right at a certain point in order to receive and process the information. This is how I've learned nowadays to communicate the information. So, for example, yes, 5%ers teach that the black man is God, right? But it's stupid for me to expect that a person who is a Christian, a person who's Jewish, a person who's believes in a particular way to call me God, right? Like I don't have that kind of ego. Whatever in your system advocates um, the highest development of man or woman. What do you call that? Yeah, you can relate to me. That then I can make that connection, right? You know, if for instance all you can say is just like you're a good man, I'm okay with that. Um, so my advice to people is just like, realize that the the epiphany that you're having, everyone else is not having that epiphany at that time. So you have to be able to feed people in bite-sized people, you know, bite-sized pieces. Don't go in there thinking that you're going to convert your whole family to what you just discovered, you know. And then also really think about the fact that you are leaving a community, right? And so a fallacy, I should say a fallacy, a fault many times, many of these new systems of organization of thinking or ways of life have is that many people get in contact with this information via the internet, right? So they don't have that particular community right around, right? So I talk to this a lot today. It's like when I grew up around 5%ers, right? I was in the tri-state area. I was to be around them a lot. I was part of and still a part of that physical community. But if you're getting your information offline and then you now declare that you belong to that community and that community is not physically around you, you're going to have a deficit. And when you leave your family, you're going to feel really alone. And you that's where you end up folding, right? That's where you end up like, I need community because we need community. There's no way around it. We need community. We need people to be there for us, and we need to be there for other people. So, yeah, I think like it's a part of on the person, um, and just realize that you're not there to convert your family. Chill, take it down a thousand. Take it just go in there easy, you know. Because yeah, if you throw out pork out of the refrigerator, your mom's not gonna like it. It is. It is. Hmm. Yep. Mm. Yep. Right. Right. Yep. Right. Hmm. Yep. 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 And I think for me, a big part of that realization was is that as much as I was claiming that Christians were judgmental, look at me. You know what I'm saying? I became a 5%er and I was uber judgmental of everybody. You know, and I was like, that's something that I don't want. Right. So I agree with you. I think like, once I got the information, it felt like I was on fire. You lit me on fire. I got to tell everybody. But as I got older, I realized like, yeah, if I'm teaching a history lesson, right? I don't teach the history lesson the same way to a college student as I would teach the same history lesson to someone who's in fourth grade, right? So it's not so much for me now about um, not teaching or not telling people the information. It's just I moderate on how I do it, and I also moderate in terms of uh, levels, right? So for instance, um, in the 5%, you know, in terms of one of the frameworks, we have civilization, righteousness, the knowledge of yourself, right? In terms of an order of operations. Um, so civilization is just teaching a person, just to be civil. You know what I'm saying? Um, you say thank you, all that kind of stuff. Righteousness is like, the greatest good. Like, see that woman that she needs to cross the street, help her cross the street. Knowledge of self comes after that, right? So it's like if I'm six, everybody's not going to make it to the knowledge of self. That's part of our framework in terms of 5%. As we say that we're the 5% who have this particular, collection of information and knowledge. So when I was comfortable with the fact that everybody doesn't have the knowledge 120, which is our oral framework that we memorize, um, to be a good person, right? Some people only going to get the civilization. Some people only going to get the righteousness. A few will make it to knowledge of self. That's okay. And one thing that I was really taught by the God who taught me, God Darmel, a lot, because I was judgmental. I mean, I would say when I became a vegan, I was yeah, don't be around me. I wouldn't want to be around me, now. If I be back then, I wouldn't want to be around me. And I remember I was being judgmental about this particular God who was smoking a cigarette. I was like, you supposed to have the knowledge of the soul. Why are you over there smoking a cigarette? God Darmel looked at me. He's like, he used to be on heroin, and I was like, okay, but he's like, he used to be on heroin, and so it's like what I was looking at as like something that was unhealthy and da 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 da. That was keeping him from doing freaking heroin again, and that was literally a better health decision for him, than being on heroin. But me being super judgmental could only saw one thing. I got the lesson after that, but I was like, oh, And so I think that's how I now approach with people. It's just like I don't I don't go in there with the preconceived notion that they're going everything that's in my head. I'm going to be able to put it in their head in 15 minutes. It's ridiculous. It's a lived experience, like you said. Something brought me to this point. something brought me to the point where I was able to be receptive to the information, and something allowed me to move on and grow with that information. So if I don't recognize that everybody is different, then I'm stupid. Everybody is different. You know, and deserves different lesson plans. You know, you part. Wow. First of all, every time I hear a story like that, I'm like, yo, we did it. Like when I hear, like stuff like that, just like, yeah, it makes me cry sometimes because like where we are right now, especially with the attention span of our youth, and not just our youth, but even older people, like a book, like almost it's almost you almost don't hear about anybody talking about books, like so like to hear that like high school students like actually gravitated and got something from that, it's just like yes, mission accomplished. I'm good. Let's go. But like, um, so this is the funny thing about the Hood Health Handbook. It was supposed to be a cookbook. It was supposed to be a cookbook. We were going to do a cookbook specifically for five percenters. Okay. Um, and we just had so much other stuff come in because we had, especially many of the Earths, also women in the context of the 5%, we call them Earths. Many of the Earths, they were like doulas, herbalists, midwives, and they were just shooting us other stuff. And we were like, oh, maybe we should pivot. Here's the other funny thing about the Hood Health Handbook. Um, it was only supposed to be one book, half the size of one of the volumes. We had so much information that we had to increase the size of the book and make two volumes. Um, and the third thing about the Hood Health Handbook is the Hood Health Handbook was literally just a stand-in name for the title that we hadn't come up with yet. But it was it ended up just resonating so perfect once we did the cover design. Supreme, he did the cover. Once we did that, it was like, okay, it's the Hood Health Handbook, I guess. You know, and our whole thing with it was even the authors and stuff. Our whole thing was to make it accessible, right? Because both me and Supreme, who's 5% also, we had gone through, like I said, that phase where we were just very, very technical. If you want to get technical, you read some of our other books. You read the Science of Self book. That junk is mad technical. You know what I'm saying? But the Hood Health Handbook, we wanted it to be very, very straightforward. We wanted the articles in it to be digestible, literally. You know, we wanted people to be able to use it as a reference book, as a book where you could open it up, read something, get something from it, and put it back on the shelf and felt like you didn't have to read like five chapters in order to get the information. And another thing that um, we realized um, is we basically developed. Supreme had done a little bit developing the writing technique that we used in his How to Hustle and Win books. Um, and basically, a lot of that was like we need to speak to the people as the people. Um, and so it just naturally flowed into okay, where was my contact with health coming from, right? Where was my transformation of health coming from? It was coming from hip hop. A lot of the things, that um, piqued my interest were hip hop. I became a vegan because of hip hop. You know what I'm saying? I became a vegan because of freaking KRS's one beef song. You know what I'm saying? Where he talks about not, don't eat that cow, because it has all these chemicals in it. That's a major song. Or X Clan, living off the earth, eating herbs and fruits. Like these little things like that were like, oh, like that golden era of hip hop was very, very influential for me in so many ways. Whether it's like, you know, my way of life in terms of there's a whole bunch of 5% in hip hop, whether it was the health thing, or whether it was even like history and political thing. When freaking, Brother Jay is talking about like, in X Clan and stuff, they're talking about Patrice Lumumba, like Ida B. Wells. I'm like, okay, who are these people? So like that was something we wanted to make sure that we had within the Hood Health Handbook because we wanted it was kind of like a taking back from veganism. So like I was the same way with veganism when I first became a vegan. Like they were hardcore in terms of like their particular, for lack of a better, white perspective, right? So I was like, vegan actually seems like a good concept, but people in my hood they don't want to eat tofu, and that's okay because they already eat rice and beans. You know what I'm saying? So it was more about like, oh wait, we have information in our communities that speaks to this issue, and so that's what the Hood Health Handbook turned into. It turned into what is the information that we have that's in our communities about health, and how can we speak to the people in our community? And then we got the cosign. When we got the cosign from, oh God, I can't remember the name. It'll come to me. My goodness. No, this is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. Um, yeah, I know. I have that. Gosh, I'm gonna be so mad at myself. Yeah. I know it's comprehensive. I was really okay. Open I'll get back to it. Anyway, once we got the cosign, um, we you couldn't stop us at that point. Oh my gosh. Okay, now I'm just ashamed of myself. I can't believe this is even going to be on here. Um, but once we got the cosign by Dick Gregory, we were good. We were good. Once we got the cosign by Dick Gregory, who was forwarded a copy of the book, and he called us back, and I actually have the message that he left us. Basically, he said, you know, what we were doing was right and exact, and that we were the next ones to hold the baton. So once we got that, you couldn't tell me anything, and we were good at that point. We were good at that point. But yeah, that's it kind of came out all crazy, but it manifested itself right, and then from that point, it was easy to use that book to then build the platform in terms of workshops and talks and stuff like that. One, stop letting them shaming your food. Stop letting white people shame your food. Um, Soul food is not unhealthy. It's portions. It's what you eat. And first of all, half the stuff that we classify as soul food today ain't even really soul food, right? Or it's not in the same form. Like people don't want to hear like the fullness of soul food, right? So for instance, soul food itself has so many more vegetables and stuff that we typically eat, right? Most people probably only familiar with a few, like okra and collard greens or whatever. There's a whole herbal, a whole because we were eating more plant matter than animal matter even during slavery, right? Because even if it was did have some kind of meat, that meat was pretty much used in stews and as pot liquor and stuff like that, so it could spread out the nutrients and stuff. So that's the one thing. Soul food. I mean, I make references to soul food and Big Mama and stuff all the time, but the issue is that not so much the soul food, but it's just like, yeah, if you're working in the field, you weren't eating fried food 3 times a day, right? You weren't eating like grits and bacon and all that kind of stuff in the morning, going out and work, eating it in the afternoon. and then eat at night. Two, we were working,
Right.
we were physically moving, right? So that has a different effect too. So that's the one, the main thing that affects health is processed food, right? So that's one of my big things when I go on people's day when they're like when they ask like, what can I do to be healthy? Like, it's not even a matter for me anymore of like you eating meat or you not eating meat. It's about get real food. Get off of as much processed food as you can. If you're eating meat, try to eat the best meat you can. Meat, go to the butcher to see that he's actually getting you real meat instead of you calling yourself not a vegan, but that freaking hamburger you eating from the fast food place is like 40% soy. You know what I'm saying? So like that's one big thing. The processed food, uh, movement, movement, movement. However, you got to get that movement, get it in, and it doesn't have to be. You don't have to join a damn gym. You know what I'm saying? If it works for you, it works for you. But that's not, you know, that's not the lowest bar. The lowest bar is literally just like, man, that time you're gonna watch that half-hour television show, take a walk around the block a few times. You know what I'm saying? Um, the other thing that I would want people to take away from the book is that the reason why there's so many um, references to hip hop and different ailments in there um, is because hip hop is a reflection of black and brown communities, right? So it makes sense that the issues that we find in black and brown communities will be reflected through some of the artists in hip hop, right? So is it that continuity to realize that hip hop is a lot more than just a musical art form. It is an expression of the black and brown community at a certain point where it was a crisis, in the South Bronx. And so that informs a lot of the stuff we do. So, you want to look at some health trends and stuff in the black and brown community, look at hip hop. You know, a lot of those same things are right in our communities. So, yeah, those are some major things I would. And the final thing is that we have the solutions in our community. We have the solutions. They just cut us off from access to a lot of other things. And yes, we should have access to even Western medicine and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the solutions we really just need to get back to in our own community. I always say the crazy cat lady down the street with 5 billion different plants in her house, and she knows the use for each of them. Go talk to her. You know what I'm saying? Or the candy lady. You know what I'm saying? With the little ices and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like all these little different things are within our neighborhoods. A part of my allergies.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right. Right. Yeah. No. No. Right. Right. And then also, many times you talking to those people and who say they can't afford it, and their gear is on point. Why is all your gear on point? Your gear is on point because you wouldn't be caught with a fake bag, but you eating fake meat. Stop, stop. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then like you said, like there are ways, um, for it to be affordable. The other problem that a lot of people I find has is that they want to try to mirror the diet they're eating in a vegan way or a vegetarian way. And yeah, that's expensive because all you're doing is eating processed vegetarian food. So you want to you want to basically right. You want right. Yeah, yeah. I'm like, just eat the real meat. Shoot. Um, you want everything to look the same, so you get burgers, you get all these things that approximate. If I eat a burger, I eat a black bean burger. You know what I'm saying? But like, if you're buying all the processed stuff, yes, it's expensive. The other thing is that because I use the timeline of the crack era because I saw where it fractured my community. Like, so when I grew up in New Haven, um, the neighborhood I grew up, like, it used to be Irish and Italian before blacks moved in there, like around World War One and World War Two. Because of that, a lot of the black families were from down south. Literally, almost every backyard in the neighborhood that I grew up in had some type of garden in it. All right, we had a garden in our backyard. Across the street, the lady, she had freaking grapes along her back fence that she couldn't do anything with, but she would give them to my mother. My mother would make jam, jelly, give it out to people and stuff. Um, that crack era fractured, um, and when that happened, we lost a lot of knowledge on how to do stuff. So, for instance, we lost the knowledge of how to garden. Right, that next generation didn't learn. I had to go back and relearn because I never learned. Um, that generation also didn't learn how to cook. So that's another challenge we face, even when presenting access to healthy food or fresh grown food. Right, like the garden down here, we got it all. You know what I'm saying? Every little thing. But if the person don't know how to cook it, then that's something else we have to offer too. Now we have to offer workshops on how to cook, how to prepare this food. So many times people just think like, oh, we just need to give people access to this. Yeah, but you also took away the skill sets of the people. So we also have to teach the skill sets also in order to, deal with the new access that they may have. Pardon. Yes. Mhm. Yeah. 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 Right. 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 Yeah, you have to go through that. My father, I remember. So this is, also. And I remember my father, in his older years, like I was coming back from work, he's like, pick me up a Whopper. I had a Whopper in a long time. Picked him up a Whopper at Burger King. He took one bite of it, threw it out. He's like, no. This is not 100% beef. And he knew, and he's right because even beyond the Beyond Meat, even the normal meat, it's cut with stuff. So like, this is from somebody who started eating at fast food restaurants when they first started. So when McDonald's first started, when Burger King first started, they had 100% beef, right? And so like he knows the difference on his palate. He knows right away. The sad thing from that is that we now also face generations that may not have grown up with home cooking, who may not have grown up with real food. They can't even tell the difference. So they can't tell the difference between like good meat, bad meat, good vegetables, bad vegetables. They don't have that hands-on knowledge. So yeah, there's a lot, and I like I said, I learned that because when I when I first became a vegan, I was a rabid vegan. I was just like like I was horrible. Um, once again, once I learned all the information that's out there and how we have to do things different in our community, there's a different goal for our community, right? So for like a white vegan who's arguing like become a vegan in order to save the pig that's going to get slaughtered. My perspective is just like, no, become a vegan because there's black and brown workers in that factory who they don't care about, right? There's the people who live by this factory where they dump all the blood in the river, and in the sewage are black and brown. That's my angle, how I come at them now. But that's only from experience, realizing what really attracts people, what really holds their attention. And if the end goal is to pass on the information, then guess what? If the information is not being passed on, then I have to change. I have to pivot. And unfortunately, in my experience with a lot of white people, they refuse to pivot, and so that's okay because we have even the history of freaking veganism itself is from black and brown people. You ain't no historical societies in ancient Europe that were like pure like about vegetarians and vegans. Oh, in India there were, you know what I'm saying? In West Africa there were, you know, um, and even the whole hippie movement and stuff in America stuff. That's all influenced by, you know, black and brown people, Eastern religions, and Eastern spirituality practices. So once again, even re-examining that, now I can look at vegan as it's not theirs. It's something that we have a stake in. And so if we have a stake in it, if it's within our lineage, if it's within our history, oh, now I don't need you as a reference anymore. I can go and get these original sources. And that brings people in a lot easier. You know. Yeah. First step always is inventory of the people that's around you. It's a major unspoken of kind of thing. You need to take inventory of the people that's around you, the people that's for you, neutral, and against you. And you need to figure out how to get the people against you outside of your circle, and you need to get your own self worth and value up. Because that's the first thing in terms of when you're switching into new lifestyle and experience new things. There's those friends who are good friends, right? Who like if you're about to join a cult, they're like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that. Or you with that ganky girlfriend, they're like, yo, you need those people, right? But there's others that are, I hate to use the term haters, but they are. They're secret haters who are just wishing that you will fall. And they they survive off of being close to you. So that's the first thing. Do your inventory. Then you do the internal inventory. You know, literally sit down and figure out what is it I want out of life. These seem like really big general questions, but they really are questions that we probably should be asked like almost every year of our elementary and middle school and high school education, college education. Like, what do you want out of life? What and outside of the capitalist construct, right? Because when I was little, I wanted to be an archaeologist or astronaut, right? My fourth grade teacher told me because I was smart, you should be an engineer. They make good money. I'm in fourth grade. I don't even know what an engineer is, right? And then when she's like, it involves, right? She's like, it involves math. I was like, that doesn't sound like something. But they made it so much in my mind a thing that even when I got to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, um, and it took me a while to embrace that I'm an author, right? Like that's what I was supposed to be from the beginning. But literally, they just kept telling me, everybody was telling me like, there's no money in it. Now I'm looking back and I'm just like, y'all were some bull crap because they write. All these writers, like I was in the comic books. These writers for comic books are now writing Marvel movies and getting made bad paid. There's writers who, books, but like newspaper, like there's all these ways, but that was it. So like self inventory, all that kind of stuff. And if there's stuff in your life is bad for you, cut it out right away. Something is that bad for you. You just have to be honest with yourself. Like for me, I know what my vices are. One of my vices are sugar. I got a sweet tooth. I know that. You know, um, but yeah, I think those are some basic things right away. Keep a journal too. I think keeping a daily journal of your thoughts is important. Um, so that you can have a conversation with yourself. That's what a journal is for me. A conversation with yourself. Um, and I think that's important because it allows you to kind of measure, get a barometer where you are, where you want to go. Like if you read in your journal and you having the same problems like month in after month out, now it's now written down, right? You can see it. Whereas when you if you're just thinking about it, it doesn't connect the time and space, right? But when it's in a paper and you see it, you're like, oh, okay. So yeah, journal keeping is important, I think. Like I said, for a conversation with oneself. And start small. Yep. Yeah. And also start small. Do you want to become a vegan? Cool. Cool. You don't have to become a super vegan overnight. You know what I'm saying? It's okay to start with meatless Mondays. It's okay. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make you less of anything. You know. In fact, it's smarter to start small. It's smarter to start by sticking your toe in the water instead of jumping in and realizing that water was only 6 inches deep. Now you look stupid. You know what I'm saying? Like it's important to start small because everything that's big is composed of smaller components. Everything. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah. There is so, there's so much out there. Yeah, and then also another thing about um, doing it that way is it sticks more, right? I know some people, benefit by doing something cold turkey, like quitting smoking cigarettes or something like that, and it works for them. But overall, in the long run, for the majority of people, if you start with the smaller steps, they'll stick. Versus, you were freaking a super carnivore on Monday, then Tuesday you a vegetarian. I mean a vegan. Yeah, that ain't gonna work. You're gonna get some pushback. You know what I'm saying? Your body's gonna push back. Everything's gonna push back. Um, and then with the small steps, you become more rooted. It's like your footing is more sure with each thing. You know, and that way also, like you mentioned, is how pretty much I talk to people about stuff. One, I don't go to convert people anymore. I don't even kind of use that language per se. But like, if people talk to you about how can you eat like that, don't worry about it. All I do is at the next potluck, I bring an ill dish, and everybody. I remember at one job, all I brought literally was like some garlic, sauce, green beans, whatever. And I brought cabbage too. And they were like, "Oh my god, this is so good." So that's just all how I do. So the next potluck, like, can you bring that again? Yes, of course I can bring that again. We started something. Another one of my friends worked at the job that I worked at, um, and we work with mentally and physically challenged adults in a day program, and we had a kitchen there. And so, like, one time we decided we were going to do breakfast, right? We had our breakfast over here, right, and they had their breakfast over there. They kept looking at ours. I was like, yeah, don't worry about it. Yes, that sausage and gravy, don't worry about it. Yeah, that tofu scramble look good. Don't you know what I'm saying? Like, so the key also is like just make good tasting food. People will eat good tasting food no matter what, So that's how I communicate. And then, like you said, your experience with dairy. I'm sniffing now because my allergies out here in Portland. But my first thing that I stopped when I became vegan was dairy also. And you know why? Because someone told me I had asthma bad growing up. Someone told me if you cut out dairy, it'll help with your asthma. And cut back. So I cut. I ran track. So I cut out dairy. Didn't have to use the inhaler anymore. All stayed in track in high school. So like for me, I realized that it wasn't so much about the verbal conversion of a person, instead of just like, yo, try it and see what happens. And that will be the testimony for that person. You know, so like when something in real time happens, like our people, like don't get me wrong, there's many of us who care for like they don't want to see dogs killed or stuff like that, right? But like it connects with them more when it's literally something that changes their personal life right away. You know, so me saying like, yo, I got off the inhaler, they're like, what? So someone with asthma, they're like, oh, let me try that. Or someone who's having skin issues, try that, and they're like, oh, it works. You know, that becomes the testimony right there. Partner. Wow, wow. What's so funny is I've been working forever and a day on my website, right? I've been working forever and a day on my website, and I need to just finish it. When the pandemic hit, in the beginning of the pandemic, I was very, very strong on social media. In the middle of the pandemic, you know, I had several personal things that just overwhelmed me. So my presence online wasn't the same way that it has been in the past, and I'm basically renewing that now. The best way that people can consistently uh, keep in contact with me probably is Twitter, which is under A Life Allah, and also IG, which is also under A Life Allah. And then also my Facebook, which is A Life Allah. You know, I guess I could say A Life Allah on all platforms. Um, those are the three main ways that you'll find out new information from me as I move forward. I have a couple of books that I'm working on. Um, I have actually a couple of classes that I'm working on. Hopefully by the fall, or maybe in the winter, we'll have some online classes which we'll be teaching. A lot of that stuff you can also find through my publishing partner, which is Supreme Design publishing.com. So a lot of our new books come out through there. Any books that I do will come out through um, that particular publishing imprint. So those are places that you can pretty much hear me rant and tell you what I'm working on and things like that. And through those platforms, you can also find the other platforms that are connected to. Like there's my job platform at Art Village Gardens. There's the there's also everything from Hood Health on IG also. But primarily through those three, you can get in contact with me and know what I'm working on. I'm also doing a lot of role playing games right now, like tabletop role playing games. So I'm doing all that group. So you can find me on this podcast, Africans playing role playing games. Yeah, so I'm doing that now too. It's like, why not? You know. Yes. Thank you for being patient with me. I know we've been trying to make this happen a minute. I'm glad that we finally able to make it happen. Um, and yeah, just we at a time right now where things have changed and they're not going back to the old. So you might as well figure out how you're going to innovate and invest in the new. So, don't really fall back on like old systems and stuff. This is a beautiful time to create something new. So do it. Do it. Thank you, Brandon. You know, and let me know when to drop. All right. Thank you. Okay. thank you again. Like once again, thank you for your patience. So like, yeah, I'm glad we finally got to do this. You know, I'll definitely be building. And I'll see that picture and everything too. You also take it. Peace.